Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
So my name is Caroline Soubayroux. I'm from France, but I live in London now since 2015. I work in investment banking. I'm a project manager there. I'm married to David Ferguson, and I am also a mother now of a little girl. And yes, I have been cycling since 2016. And in 2021, I left with my husband for 6 months to cycle around the world. And we have a Guinness World Record for the fastest couple to cycle around the world.
Oh, fantastic. And so have you always been into cycling? Do you remember getting your first bike when you were younger?
No, I had a bike when I was little, like almost every child. You know, I remember learning to ride with my grandmother around the house on a gravel path, but it was never a passion per se. If anything, my family is very much not very pro cycling. I remember my dad getting angry at cyclists on the road. So it was never a sport that attracted me. And mostly I kind of saw it as a kind of, old men, middle-aged men getting into Lycra and cycling around. So when I met my husband, who really, really liked cycling, it was a bit of a shock between us. But he saw me on a bike because I started to cycle to go to work on just a simple Santander bike because I got injured running. I got into running much later in life, so around when I finished university, so around the age of 21, 22. And I started to commute to work by running, and I got injured. And so when I got injured, I had to find a solution to go to work, and I didn't want to be on the tube. So I started to cycle to work on the Santander bike. And it's when my husband saw me on one of these bikes, he said, "You should really try cycling because I think you'd be really good at it." And he bought me my first bike for Christmas, a simple road bike. And he took me for my first proper bike ride. I think it was around 36 kilometers. And I crashed and I came back covered in mud. And I said it was the best time I ever had. I can't believe, that I never tried this before. And so very quickly it became for me an escape from the city, being able to go away at the weekend. And I discovered the whole social aspect, joining a cycling club. And it was really important for me that I learned to be independent on the bike. So I got myself a Garmin. I tried to really explore new routes. And then bit by bit, I started to extend the distances because I kind of like the sense of adventure and I like to push myself. And that's how I slowly got into ultra distance racing.
Do you remember your first ultra distance race?
Yes, I do, because it was a bit of an insane one. It was a race across France. So it's 2,500 kilometers across France. And at the time, it was from Mandelieu-la-Napoule, which is close to Nice, all the way to the north of France, basically. So it was a bit of a crazy distance to do for the very first time. I got extremely sick, dehydrated. I was vomiting. Everybody thought that I was going to quit, but I made the cut of time. The fire brigade came, but I decided to keep on going, even if my dad actually traveled all the way to where I was in the middle of the night to try and stop me continuing because he said I was going to die. And he was really worried. But I said, no, I got to do this. Otherwise, I would never forgive myself. If I think I can still go, I should go. And I managed to finish the race. I was last one, but it was a really, really cool adventure because I think a lot of people ended up following me because there was so much people behind me because they could see how much struggle I had been through. I had everything. My bike was broken. I got sick. I lost the battery as well of my Di2. So it was really absolutely insane, but I finished. And from then on, I was completely hooked. I was like, this was crazy. I have to say, I think for me in my life, there was a before and after race across France. It gave me so much confidence. And yeah, it was a really great transformative event for me.
So who brought up around the world, you or your husband? Do you remember like how that came up in conversation one day? Or maybe this is something that we should do?
It wasn't my husband. I think it was probably the first 2 weeks of dating. He was telling me, I have this dream. I want to cycle around the world because he used to always he started bikepacking before it was even a thing, before everybody was doing it and it was on social media. And so he used to do it when he was like 18 and so on. And when he was studying medicine over the summer, he would go for this very long trip. And one of those trips was cycling across the US with his best mate. And while he was doing that, Mark Beaumont was attempting his first ride around the world, which was, I don't know, like I think it was 160 days or so, a bit more like maybe 200 days or something like that at the time. And David thought, okay, that's for me the ultimate bike trip. That's what I want to do. I want to cycle around the world. So when he met me, he told me immediately, I want to take time off at some point in my life and I want to do that. And I just want you to know that because I don't want to be with somebody that wouldn't be supportive. And I said, that sounds awesome. I'd love to be part of that because I've always been a little bit risk adverse. I never really dared taking risk. I've been a very good student, very good pupil and very good at university. Then I got my job immediately and then I was working. And there was this thing in my life where I was telling myself, okay, but it would be great to have a big adventure, to do something crazy. And so when he told me that, I said, I love it. I'd love to come. And knowing that there was this in the horizon was also a big motivation for me to get into cycling and to enjoy it, because then I knew we could do that together. And then, we sort of saw an opportunity around 2019 after we got married and I had not done my first ultra. We thought, okay, maybe now we can start thinking about it. We don't have kids. Let's do it. And then COVID happened. So
I love this. This is amazing. So you're definitely both on the same page. You've got this dream, cycling around the world. You're starting to think about it. Are you both planners? Like, how did it even work? Like, were you trying to go after a record, or were you thinking, okay, actually, there's various places around the world, or there's certain things that I want to see. Let's put them all on a map. Let's join up the route. When you started talking about it, like, how did those conversations go? Like, how specific were you?
So it was really a pipe dream. We knew we wanted to cycle around the world. Then we didn't want to do a record originally, but we liked the idea of following the rule of the Guinness World Records, because then it gives you a set of, something to define what cycling around the world is, because otherwise, what is it? Do you need to do all the countries in the world? Why a country rather than another, So that was the first thing we knew. We wanted to respect these rules just so that in our head we'll be like, okay, we've done that. So in a way, we've cycled around the world. So the rules are, you need to cycle 29,000 kilometers, so 18,000 miles minimum. Then you need the overall distance travel must be the circumference of the Earth, but it needs to be 29,000 kilometers cycling. Then it needs to be, you need to finish and start in the same place. You need to go through 2 antipodal points, and it needs to be in only one direction. So you can't come back on yourself. And that's cycling around the world according to Guinness. So we thought, okay, we're going to do that. After that, basically, COVID happened, and then our career as well sort of set the idea of record in our heads, because we thought, okay, we could do it like Mark Beaumont did, which is around 100 miles a day the very first time. That's realistic. We don't have much time to train because we have full-time careers. My husband is an orthopedic surgeon. I work in investment banking, so really busy. And then my husband does his rotation. So he's a junior doctor and they do rotation, and his rotations are 6 months. So he said, in order to not impact my career too much, the ideal thing would be to do it in 6 months. I was a bit annoyed because I thought, okay, I want to take a year so I can really enjoy it. I can stop, I can see things, I can discover places. If I do it in 6 months, I'm going to have to kind of rush it. But we thought, okay, fine. If that's the only way we can do it, let's do it in 6 months. And I think David thought at the time, what would be funny? We could check if there are people that have done it on 2 separate bikes as a record, because we know that tandem exists, but as 2 people together on 2 separate bikes, I'm not sure that it does. And he checked and it didn't. So we thought, okay, let's register ourselves with Guinness. Let's see if they accept the proposal and let's try and do it. And that's how the whole record idea started. And then David wasn't that fussed in the end for the record, but I got really, really into it, mostly because as the trip went on and unfolded, it became a huge source of stress to respect the rules of Guinness because we had to constantly change the route we were following due to the COVID restrictions. And so because we had to sacrifice so much in order to respect the rules of Guinness, I became extremely attached to the record. For me, it was essential that we get that record. So when we finally got the letter after almost a year, because it took them a lot of time to validate the route, review all the document we have to send them, because it's quite a heavy admin job you have to do, I was absolutely ecstatic. But yeah, that's how it started. And the way it works in our couple, generally David comes up with the big helicopter idea, say we should do that. And then I'm very much the planner. So I spend a lot of time while we were both working, I was the one that spent a lot of time, putting together the route and then thinking about the equipment and all this sort of things. But yeah.
I think you initially decided to start in London, but you had to change your plans because of COVID. So what were the changes that you needed to make sort of initially with the route, and when did you actually start?
Originally, we wanted to start in the spring, and we wanted to follow the route that most record people follow. So if you look at the latest record from Lyle Wilcox, that's Lyle Wilcox, right? I mean, latest, yeah. And Mark Bowman and so on, they always follow Northern Hemisphere route. They go through super nice, easy country. I'm sorry to say, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So you have the infrastructure, the roads are great. Europe, everything's fine. And because you're Northern Hemisphere and you go at a certain season, you generally have better winds. So it means you have tailwind, which means you can be faster. So that's what we wanted to do. We're like, okay, we're going to do a record. Let's keep it easy. We could not do that because of COVID. So when we wanted to start in the spring, we couldn't. We had to start in the fall. So already that stopped us, for trying for some country. And then when we wanted to leave Asia, so a big section of the route was closed. There was no way for us to go to Asia. By the time we would have arrived in places like Turkey or Iran, it would have been winter. And I think Iran was still closed as well at that time. So we thought, okay, there's no way. So we had to change the route. We decided to leave from London. And actually, so as you know, we need to always cycle west to east. So we cycle west to east inside London. And then we flew to Canada because Canada was the only place in the world at the time that was opened for people to come and visit without having to quarantine, because that was also the issue we had. We didn't want to quarantine anywhere, otherwise we would have wasted a lot of time. So we went through Canada, cycled down to the border with the US. And by doing that, basically in 14 days, we covered the quarantine that allowed us to go into the US. So we had to fly to the US because for some reason we couldn't cycle across the border because of COVID. And then we cycled across the US all the way to Florida. And from there, we flew to the only country in South America that was open, which was Bolivia. Cycled across Bolivia, had to take a bus when we arrived at the border because the entry point was closed due to COVID in order to get to another entry point. And then we cycled across Argentina. And luckily, at the time, there was a new variant of COVID that started in Africa, but South Africa remained open. So we took a flight to South Africa and then we cycled across Africa, basically. So we did Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Tanzania, and Kenya. And what's very important as well, why did we choose Africa? And it was very important that we would go there. It's because we needed the two antipodal points. So when you have antipodal point, when you cycle around the world, you generally cycle to New Zealand because it's antipodal to Spain. That's why everybody needs to go there. So Wellington, I think, and Madrid are antipodal. The problem is that New Zealand, I don't know if you recall, but during COVID, one of the last countries to open was New Zealand. So it was completely closed. We couldn't go there. But we realized that Guernsey in Botswana was antipodal to Hawaii. So that's why we went to Africa. Then we went to Europe, pending Australia to open. Thank God Australia finally opened. So we went to Europe, flew to Australia, cycled across Australia. And even when we arrived in Australia, Western Australia finally opened. So we took another flight in order to get to as far as we could, so to Perth. And then we cycled across Australia. I think it took us a month. And then we flew to Hawaii, cycled across Hawaii, went back to Europe and finished the final leg in Europe. And that's how we did it. And so when we were doing it, it seemed like to be all over the place, but we were extremely careful with, the coordinates of where we were starting and finishing and so on. So that when you actually put the map together, we did cycle around the world. Just we wasted so much time flying, replanning, and so on. But in the end, the route was there. So luckily, it took a lot of time for Guinness to put it all back together, but they validated, they validated the record. So it's all good now, but it was quite hard to explain to people what we were doing and how.
It sounds very stressful.
Very stressful. It was extremely stressful, I have to say. It was every night, you have this idea when you see people bikepacking and so on. You sit down in the evening and you relax and you enjoy the place. We will finish the day. It was late. We needed to think about the next day. Where were we going? And every evening, literally every evening, it was planning the next day. Okay, where do we go tomorrow? How much can we do? Where are we compared to where we're supposed to be? And then communicating with Guinness saying, listen, we wanted to go to India, but India just closed the border again. So is that okay? Can we do this? Can we do that? It was just such a constant source of stress. And that's why I got so attached to the record, because I remember a very, very low point. It was a very rainy day in northern Spain. And we were in a McDonald's, and all of a sudden, Guinness started to tell us that if we didn't go to Australia, which was closed, they would not validate the record. And so I remember crying and being so upset, because I told David, if I had known that they would be like this, I would have done things completely differently. I would have, screw the record. I would have spent more time in some nice places and done it in a much more relaxed way. But in the end, it all worked out. But yeah, there was time where we really needed to cheer each other up, and go through the motion. But it was hard. It was difficult sometimes.
What was life like on the road? What time were you waking up? What were you eating? Were you camping most nights? Were you trying to average, 100 miles a day? What was that looking like the day-to-day realities of being out there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 100 miles a day, and sometimes more, sometimes less. But I would say it's a good average, probably 200, because we wasted a lot of days traveling and so on. So unfortunately, we had to increase the mileage. The day on the run, I mean, it's really unglamorous. It's really just grabbing food where you see it. You don't want to spend too much money as well. So it's a lot of eating on the parking lots of supermarkets. And then I think Africa was quite difficult in many ways sometimes, because the food you would get was not always very nutritious. It was mostly just paps, this kind of like a flour that they give you, maize flour, and very lean chicken. So we were eating that in villages wherever we stopped. And then just some cookies, a lot of it, and then just bread we'll buy. So it was not like really glamorous food, I would say. The US was very rich in food, but also, at some point I was like, I'm just craving some vegetables. We always eat every day to fast food places and so on. And it was good for energy, but not great in terms of nutrition. I think the best place for us for nutrition was Australia, because David's dad came. So he had a camper van. And we all of a sudden we had fruits and vegetables and beans on toast, and it was just amazing. And then day to day, really, we did quite a bit of camping. Obviously, Australia, we did the US and Canada, but then very quickly, I mean, in Southern Hemisphere, in places like Bolivia and Africa, there was no point camping because accommodation were extremely cheap, and it was just more comfortable for us. And also, it was a rainy season, which we didn't know. Summertime there is a rainy season. So honestly, camping would have been awful because it was extremely muddy. So mostly there it was hotels. And I mean, when we started in the morning, I don't know, it was very dependent on how we were feeling. David was really insistent on resting and making sure that we slept enough. So it was around probably 7, 8 a.m. and then finishing around, very dependent as well of the day, probably 7 in the evening, 8, sometime much later. Something like that. So it was long, grueling days on the bike. And we had a lot of headwind. Actually, it was mostly headwinds the whole way because Southern Hemisphere is in that direction. It's mostly just headwind. So yeah, it was quite painful.
How did it affect your relationship in terms of, obviously you've been together a while before heading out, but, the stress of being on the road, the physicality of the challenge, working together as a team, did you get to know sort of like your partner even more? Were there any frictions? Were there any tough conversations, or were you just sort of gelling and just became like a really tight unit? And obviously, I know there can be ups and downs and everything with that. But what would that look like?
Looking back now, I would say that's probably the time we've been the closest, and I think it has brought us really, really together as a couple. And we have this shared experience that will always be there for us and does make us very, very strong. and confident in our relationship. I would say the beginning was tricky, but it was never really about our relationship or relations between the two of us. It was more about expectations toward the trip. When we started, it was in Canada. David really hates the cold. I was really motivated. I wanted to push so hard. Looking back now, I also think I was a pain. I must have been very annoying, but I was like, we need to keep pushing. This is too short. Let's go, let's go. And he was not as trained as I was. And he was very much, no, 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 no. If we start pushing like this now, we're going to injure ourselves. We're never going to finish. I don't want to do this. And he was also quite negative about certain things. And I just thought he was a bit toxic in the way he was approaching people. And so he was, I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't think that worked very well. But by the time we reached the US, I would say we got very much in sync. And definitely from South America onward, we were feeling exactly the same at the same time. It was very interesting. If I was feeling tired, Jerry was feeling tired. If I was feeling energized, he was feeling energized. We really, really, really got into sync. And I think altogether, it's been the best thing we have done for each other. And we really hope to do that again in the future, for sure.
What were some of the highlights for you? Some of the countries that you went through where you were sort of like looking at each other thinking, yeah, do you know what, we'll definitely come back here. Wish we had more time to explore here. Yeah, talk us through some of the highlights, the magical moments, the real special times.
For me, I really, really enjoy desertic places, and it can be really cold or really hot, but I like big empty space. That's really what I enjoy. So I absolutely love the Yukon. I adored Bolivia, and I thought Bolivian people were really, really interesting, very, very lovely people, a bit reserved actually compared to Argentina, where they come and they're like, welcome to Argentina, and they're very self-confident. Bolivian, they're much more, within themselves, but they were all very, very sweet. I absolutely love Bolivia, and I thought it was really, really beautiful. The US as well, actually. It's so funny. The US is a big civilized country, right? But there are some landscape there that are absolutely insane. I enjoyed as well Namibia, probably one of my favorite countries. I loved some of the places in Australia, but it was spoiled by the Australians, easy to say. They were really not nice with cyclists, especially the more towards the east you were going, the worse it got. So it was a bit painful. At the end, I was glad to be done, even if I had a great time there. Europe, I have to say, we're very spoiled. It's beautiful, obviously, for cycling. And then, David and I have a very close, a big love for Africa in general. I would say, though, that I didn't enjoy my cycling through Africa because it was raining and I was missing a bit of solitude sometimes. Every time you stop somewhere, there will be children that will come, that will touch your bikes and so on. And sometimes I was like, okay, just leave me alone for a second. David absolutely adored it. And all he wants now is to go back to Africa. He said, okay, let's go back again. We lived in South Africa, David and I, for 6 months already. He's like, let's go back, let's go. He wants to go to Rwanda. He wants to go back to Kenya. He wants to go back to Namibia. So we're going to definitely explore a bit more of Africa, hopefully with the children as well, when we have more. But yeah, it's hard to choose really one place. As you can see, all of them have something. But yeah, for me, definitely Yukon, I would say Yukon, Bolivia, Namibia, and some parts of Australia, I absolutely enjoyed. Yeah, they were beautiful. Sunsets, nature, everything. Loved it.
Did you suffer from any sort of illness or injury?
Yes, we both had a little bit of something. David mostly suffered when we started. He got really worried about his hands because he had very bad cyclist palsy. He never had a bike fit, David. So I think position in the bike wasn't right. I had to change my stem with his and so on. But we sorted it. We ordered some prolongators and so on. So by the end of it, he was a bit more comfortable. But the whole trip, he had like foam on his handlebars and so on, mostly because he was worried. Obviously, being a surgeon, he wanted to make sure he wasn't going to have any damages to his hands. There were a few saddle sores. They had a really, really bad one in Africa. And then other than that, we both had foot sickness in Argentina on a very big climbing day. I remember it was quite bad. David had it on the climb up and I had it on the descent. So that wasn't great. And then I would say as well, in Africa, in Zambia, there was this thing where I really cracked. I cracked that day. We had to finish quite early. We finished quite late, but the next day we had to take a day off. I slept until 3. I don't know if it was dehydration. I had a really, really bad reaction to the malaria medication. So my nails were falling down, my hair were falling down. I was really burned from the face. So I think that didn't help. And then in Australia, we both had COVID. So we both cycled with COVID in the middle of the desert in Australia, which was unexpected because when we tested, obviously before going, we were both negative. So we must have it dormant and then it just popped. But yeah, we both had COVID. And, we were far from everything. We're not meeting anyone or anything. So we kept on cycling, just the two of us, but we felt really dreadful. David hated me at night because I was coughing so much. He wanted to murder me. But yeah, that was the ailment we had.
Do you know how much you spent on the challenge?
Oh, I don't want to know, to be honest. We spend a lot on flights. That's for sure. That's what most expensive stuff. But no, we don't really know, to be honest. We were very lucky because of a lot of the equipment. We got it through sponsors. So the bikes were free. The clothes, we got discounts on them. All the lights, helmets, everything was free. So from that point of view, we didn't spend money. All the money we spent was hotels and flights. I'm not sure, to be honest. I have not wanted to look. So that's kind of where we're at.
What was it like when it was coming towards like sort of the end of the trip? Were you ready to finish, or were you sort of thinking, oh, I actually want to go on, I want to carry on cycling for longer?
It was mixed feelings. I think we were relieved to go back into our real lives. For me, there was a worry, because I knew once we were going to go back, we were going to back to reality. I wanted to have a child. We had work to do in the house. So I knew that I was going to be limited with the cycling. So there was a part of me that didn't really want it to end. But in order to sort of limit the damage, we made sure during the whole trip to stay in touch, with our lives in the UK. So David was in touch with his work. Actually, while we were in the US, he had to take time off to go to go from when we were in Dallas. He flew to London for a big conference where all, the other people from his rotation with the NHS go. So he made sure to stay in touch. And I made sure as well, I had a conversation with my boss when I was sitting in a gas station in Kenya. I remember that. So we tried to really make sure that they knew we were all coming back, and we stayed in touch with our family as well. So that did make the return to reality much easier. It's more afterwards that it's really hard because, you go back, and unless you have friends and family that are aware of what you've done and they understand what you've done, nobody cares. Like literally no one cares about your life. But for you, it's such a transformative, important experience. All you want to do is talk about it, but no one cares. Like at work, they're like, all right, you had a nice holiday then. They don't care. No one knows. No one cares. And also because we went during COVID, we didn't make a lot of shebang and boom about it. And we have full-time jobs. We don't have time to contact journalists and talk about those things. So no one talked about it. So for me, David doesn't care. He's not like, he doesn't need, people to hear about his story. But me, I'm somebody that likes to talk about it, that likes to share. And I really, really suffered from that. I felt like, okay, it's like it never happened. Yeah. And this is where having done it, the two of us actually was a huge help, because even if no one, around me talked about it or knew about it, I had someone that had done it with me and that can understand what I went through and what I experienced. And that was absolutely huge for me. But yeah, it was really hard going back to reality. Plus we were doing work in the house. So when we come back, we kept camping for quite a while. That kept us, in the mood of the trip. But yeah, I would say the aftermath needs to really be, you need to be aware of what's going to happen when you come back, because it is difficult, very difficult, I would say.
And were you wanting to get sort of pregnant almost like straight away, or?
Yeah, because when I came back, how old was I? I was 35 or 34. Yeah, I was 34. So I always wanted to have a family, and I thought, okay, I need to start trying. Actually, we started to trying during the trip. But I wasn't pregnant by the time we came back. But then, thankfully it happened for us, and now we have our girl. But yeah, so I sort of had all this plan and projects and so on. And yes, definitely. When we arrived, we had so much going with the house because we had this great idea while we are away. Why don't we do work in the house? When we come back this way, we can move in. Obviously, stupid idea. Nothing was ready. So we had to struggle with that when we come back. And in a way, yeah, you're right. It kept us really stressed and really busy about something else. And we didn't have time to think about the trip too much. So he avoided us being depressed or something like that.
How was it once you were pregnant and expecting in terms of your cycling? Were you still like cycling to work? Were you still managing to go out riding on the weekend? Like, how did you balance that, cycling and pregnancy?
I think I would have loved to cycle throughout my pregnancy. The first trimester, I was feeling quite sick, I have to say, but I kept cycling to work as much as I could. And I wanted to go cycling as well as a weekend. But unfortunately, I live in London, and I just felt that it was almost selfish of me to go cycling in London because of the risk that I was facing. And I know it's fine. A lot of people can do it and can be happy to do it. But around 5 months pregnant, I had a bad encounter with a driver here. And he really kind of cooled me a little bit. And I was like, okay, I don't want to keep on cycling, because if something happens, if I fall off the bike, even if nothing happens to the baby, but I need surgery or something like this, I will have to take medication and it just wouldn't be good for my child. So I decided around 5 months pregnant to stop cycling. And I was mostly running. So I did a lot of running. Sometimes people think it's also bad, but I've always been a runner. So I know for a fact it's really good for you to continue exercising when you're pregnant. So I did a lot of gymming, a lot of running. And I did go cycling in my third trimester. It was an electric bike this time because Villiers lended me one, my sponsor at the time. And I went to Tenerife. So I did cycle up TD pregnant. I think I was 7 months pregnant then, or 8 months pregnant. So I kept on cycling then because I felt, in Tenerife, I felt safer. The drivers are nice and so on. But yeah, in London, unfortunately, I stopped. I think if I was living somewhere a bit quieter, more countryside, maybe north of the UK or something, I would have kept going. But I face the same issue now with my daughter. I cycle to nursery with her through a park, but I don't feel ready yet to go on long ride with her around London because I don't think it's safe. That's a problem.
I mean, obviously, you maintain your fitness throughout your pregnancy. Were you able to carry on after you had your daughter? How was it after birth?
After birth, I felt extremely emotional. I mean, maybe because it's my first child, but I felt like my entire life had shifted in such a way. And I really just, for a month or two after she was born, I tried to really, really focus on her and spend time with her. I was off social media. Actually, I've been off social media mostly since she's been born because I don't want to be on the phone when she's around. I had a very difficult birth, but thank God actually afterbirth was fine. I healed relatively quickly. And as a challenge to myself, I'm not saying anybody should do that, but we went to the Alps because we wanted to see the Tour de France and we wanted to do a bit of cycling, maybe with my husband. And so I did manage to cycle up Mont Ventoux. So she was 5 weeks after? It was 5 weeks. So 5 weeks after she was born, I went to Mont Ventoux. I cycled up Mont Ventoux slowly, but I've done it. And then Galibier as well. So I've done those two big rides. And then after that, it was a little bit of cycling here and there, but not that much because I was mostly focused on her and my husband working and studying and so on. I don't really have anybody to look after her but myself. So I kind of really slowed down, just a bit of gymming at home. I then went to see a physio just to check that everything down there was fine and just to give me the green light to start running again. So I started to run when I could. And as soon as she was around 6 months, I bought a running pram. And now we've been running and cycling a bit as well together as soon as we can. And that has been really, really good. I have to say, if it's been much, much reduced amount of time for me, life and priorities are just different right now for me.
And you did mention that you and your husband like to cycle around the world with your family. Is that right?
With the family, we would love to do some bike trips when they're old enough. I was really keen on, having the baby in a trailer and cycling and doing bikepacking trip. My husband is not really for it. Again, it's great that people like to do it. He thinks that it might be a bit boring for Marianne. And he said also, you don't realize, Caroline, what it is. If you do that, you do maybe 30, 50 kilometers in one day, maybe less. It's not really the kind of trip that he will necessarily enjoy, I think. So we're probably going to wait until they're slightly older to do this kind of thing. But for sure, we are even thinking of doing something more like, okay, I say I don't have more kids right now, but if we have more children, we hope so. When everybody's got out of the house, graduated, and we have time for ourselves again, then maybe we take a year. When we know they're settled and they're happy, then we take a year. And then we do it again, but much, much slower this time, enjoying ourselves, stopping, eating better food, much less like a race, more like a proper bikepacking trip as such. And I'd love to go to Asia because we couldn't do it because of COVID. So that's on the bucket list.
How are you fitting exercise and health and fitness into your life at the moment? What does that look like? Obviously you're working a full-time job, you've got a little one, you've got a partner, you've both got very busy lives. How are you making it work as a family?
So what I've done is that I have a nursery, which is across 3 kilometers away. So how I do it is that I cycle with my child to nursery, and then I cycle to work, and then back and forth. So this way I can put in 40 kilometers a day of cycling, which is good. Sometimes instead of doing that, I run to it. So if I work from home, then I run with her to nursery, then I run back. So it's already 6 kilometers. In the evening, I run again to nursery, and then I run back with her. So just by doing that, I do 12 kilometers in the day. So it's already the commuting. My cardio is my commute, which is always very useful and makes it easy. And then whenever I can, when I'm at work, I have a gym there, or when I'm at home, and I do like a 30-minute YouTube session of gym, or 45 minutes. And that's how I do it, like 2 to 3 times a week. And that's how I maintain my fitness.
Thank you for sharing that. But actually, I suppose that's the best way, is combining it with the commute. And when you say like are you running with her on your back to nursery?
No. So I bought like I have a mountain buggy, which I bought on eBay for half the price. It's completely, sun washed and so on, but I love that pram. And yeah, I run with her in the pram to nursery. We also do park run together. I think she gets a bit tired of it after a while. So I think the longest distance I've done with her is around 10K. Unfortunately, she's not a huge napper. I'm hoping that, maybe naps will extend over time and I'll be able to do a bit longer runs with her. So that's how I run with her. I run with her in the pram. Yeah. And I'm hoping, that by seeing us exercising, when I take her to park run, I show her the other runners, and, she sees us running. And sometimes I have him cycle with me to the nursery. So, she sees him cycling. We're all cycling together. She understands that we are a very active family, and she enjoys that. And she enjoys the outdoors as much as we do.
So, Caroline, I know you said that you're not hugely active on social media, but would you like to share your handle so that people can find out more information about your cycle around the world, look through your pictures, etc.? Where can people connect with you? Where are you most active?
So it's on Instagram mostly. So it's Caro_SBX. So Caro_SBX. That's my social media handle. And yeah, I've been less active on it because nowadays it's really professional. You have to make lots of videos and so on. I don't have time for this.
Fair enough. And Caroline, I'd love for you to have to share your final words of advice, words of wisdom for other working mums who are passionate about getting outdoors, taking on new challenges. What advice would you like to share? But please don't say just do it. Any other advice apart from that?
I think when we took off our trip, the idea was to show that you can be a full-time working individual, have a mortgage, have obligation, and still be able to accomplish something extraordinary or accomplish a dream that you have. And I really believe that is true. And I believe that if there's something that you want to do, you need to make it happen for yourself. Otherwise, you'll live with regrets. Now that I'm a mother, I realize, right, that it's much more difficult if you have children, but it's not impossible. And you also need to understand that there are phases in your life. I wasn't always a big cyclist. Right now, I'm also not that much of a big cyclist, but that doesn't mean that at some point it won't come back for me. And I think it's very important as women to understand that in our lives, we're going to face different times, and that your time will come, and the right time for whichever adventure you want to take is going to come. And you need to focus on that, keep building, keep planning, and it will come for you.
Thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your journey and your passion for cycling. Best of luck with all your future adventures and challenges.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, tribe. Happy New Year. It seems ridiculous to be saying this now, as this episode is being released on the 7th of January. And I know I released my solo episode on the 2nd of January, but because I recorded it in the sort of the dead time between Christmas and New Year and almost forgot it was being released in 2025, I don't think I've actually wished you a Happy New Year. So Happy New Year for 2025. I hope this year is filled with so many adventures and amazing, epic travel experiences and you spend time outdoors in nature, climbing mountains, on your bike, running outside, going for walks and just living your best life with the emphasis on yours. There is no comparisons on the Tough Girl podcast. So when you listen to episodes, please don't compare yourself to what other women are doing, but use these episodes to fuel you, to motivate you, to inspire you, for you to gather tips and advice where you think, okay, so that's what she tried. Maybe I'll give that a go. Let me see if that would work with my life. Will that fit into the life that I'm living at the moment? Is it something that I want my life to look like? So please, no comparisons with what other women are doing. Focus on you and your achievements. Your only goal is to get better than you, who you are. So that's who you compare yourself to, is you. I hope your 2024 was amazing. I hope you've also taken some time to really reflect and, what went well? What did you learn? What would you like to do better? What would you like to improve on? Also, when you're doing this, be kind to yourself, please. Be kind to yourself. Just, have some compassion. Life is hard. There's a lot going on. And whether that's with families, work, the economy, society, social media. So please do be kind to yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself, and just be realistic with what happened in the year. You don't need to make it epic and amazing, but it also doesn't need to be like, oh my God, that was the worst year ever on record. And who knows, it could have been, but hopefully it wasn't. If you haven't done so already, I did release a solo episode on the 2nd of January, just gives you a little update on the past 6 months and also what my plans and goals are going to be for 2025. I'm having a bit more of a settled year this year. I'm going to spend at least the next 4 months UK-based, routine-based. And actually, one of the things that I did recently was I was starting to think, I'm feeling really comfortable. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not a good thing. So I actually put this into ChatGPT. Do you think it's bad to be really comfortable and not excited about taking on any new adventures for a while? And it came back with, which I actually found really comforting, not at all. Feeling comfortable and content without the urge to chase new adventures can actually be a really healthy and necessary phase. Life often moves in cycles. Sometimes we crave exploration and excitement, and other times we need rest, routine, and familiarity to recharge and reflect. Taking a pause doesn't mean you're losing your adventurous spirit. It just means you're giving yourself time to breathe, process past experiences, and maybe even discover new passions in quieter moments. Adventure isn't always about grand journeys. It can also be found in smaller everyday moments. If you're feeling at peace right now, embrace it. When the time is right, your next adventure will call to you naturally. So I'm feeling comfortable at the moment. And actually, after reading that, I was like, yeah, actually, I do need some rest. I do need some routine in my life, and I do need time to recharge and reflect, because I think I mentioned one of my previous episodes, I was almost doing too much and I was losing the joy for the adventures and the challenges because I was almost doing them back to back. Anyway, I've talked more about this in the Solo Reflections episode. The Tough Girl podcast, the Tough Girl vlogs from the South Island of New Zealand are live now. They are going live every Wednesday, Friday and Sunday at 7 a.m. UK time. The beginning of January, I was walking the Queen Charlotte track and then heading into the Richmond Ranges, the Pleuris River track first and then the Richmond Ranges, an incredible 9-day stretch. Queen Charlotte track is also phenomenal. These videos, so the North Island videos were very much mud and road. These videos are very much scenery, mountains, the views, OMG. So if you haven't done so already, please do go and check out the Tough Girl vlogs from the Tiara Trail. We have got an amazing website, if you haven't checked it out already, on toughgirlchallenges.com. On the website, there's more information about me, the different adventures and challenges that I've done. There is information every year on all the previous guests that we've had. There's now over 755 episodes in the back catalogue. We do have a Tough Girl blog, and there is a resources section as well. And in the resources section, if you're currently training for an ultra endurance challenge, or you're wanting to do a specific challenge, whether it's Marathon des Sards, Mount Aconcagua, you're wanting to row an ocean, do a polar exploration, or do an ultra run or do a thru hike, there's dedicated pages in the resources section with the specific episodes that would be of interest to you. So for example, if you are interested in New Zealand and that's on your bucket list, then there's more information about New Zealand, other women that I've spoken to For example, Shona McPherson, she's a counsellor and life coach. She climbed all 282 Munros in Scotland, and she shared more about taking on the Tiara Road Trail in New Zealand. We've spoken to Katrina Meggitt. She shares more about her battle with self-doubt and self-worth, walking the Tiara Road Trail in New Zealand and sailing around Great Britain with her partner on a 28-foot boat. We've got Miriam Lancewood, Woman in the Wilderness, a story of survival, love and self-discovery in New Zealand. We're actually catching up with Miriam Lancewood in February. It's a fabulous episode. That'll be well worth listening to. Alice Bond, she shares more about taking a sabbatical from work and hiking 1,300 kilometres across the South Island of New Zealand, followed by travelling in China and Japan. And Josephine Anslin shared more about running the length of New Zealand in 99 days, cycling across Sardinia, Taiwan, and down the west coast of America. Other famous names who you might recognise. Anna McNuff, she shared more about racing in the Kathmandu Coast to Coast New Zealand Challenge. Faye Shepherd's climbing Kilimanjaro, cycling the length of New Zealand and spending 6 months cycling the Andes with Anna McNuff. Frances Taylor, running, building self-confidence and quitting her job to cycle 3,000 miles around New Zealand. We've spoken to Christine Armstrong, who just returned from a 2-year cycling world. There's all the blog posts from my adventures. There's a breakdown of the costs, the recovery. There's also more information about my gear, the lessons learned, and the stats. If you want the total stats from both islands, the stats from the North Island, the stats from the South Island, all that information is on there. Thank you so much for listening to the Tough Girl podcast. I would love for you to tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast. That is how we spread these incredible stories of women doing amazing challenges. I'd also love for you to leave a review if you haven't done so already. You might have changed listening platforms. You might have moved from Apple to Spotify or to Amazon Prime. If you could leave a review, that would be amazing. If you are in a strong financial position at the moment and you could spare £5, $5 a month, I'd love for you to support the Tough Girl podcast and the work that I'm doing to increase the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. Please do visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast, and you can sign up as a monthly patron. Thank you again for listening. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.